I'm Gigi Stone. Welcome to The Mix. Understanding Islam more clearly is a major priority for Americans right now. A new film gives great perspective and insight into this. It's about the life of Denver Nuggets basketball star Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, formerly Chris Jackson. In 1996, he ignited a nationwide uproar when he refused to stand for the playing of the national anthem at the start of a game. He cited his Muslim conscience, and the film is called By the Dawn's Early Light, Chris Jackson's Journey to Islam. Here's a trailer.
Jackson has been a perfect example of the American dream of hard work and effort paying off.
He's #1 on the court, one of the best scoring guards in the NBA. But tonight, the basketball star is benched indefinitely for not standing for the national anthem. In 1993, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf announced he was no longer Chris Jackson, changing his name in accordance with his faith. Abdul Rauf also says he's opposed to standing for the flag, which many here consider a symbol of freedom.
It's also a symbol of oppression, of tyranny.
I was made out to be a villain. They were trying to stereotype me like they stereotype a lot of other Muslims.
I think it's an insult to all of the people that fought in the war and things like that, and it's an insult to America.
I respect the fact that a man has principle. I may not agree with his statement, but that's the irony of our freedom of speech, that he can say something I don't like.
Ask Mahmoud if he'd rather not get paid in American dollars.
They assassinated my character. It became an issue of money. Well, I remember the question was posed to me, how can you be oppressed making $2 million a year? I said, I grew up with Tourette's syndrome. I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up knowing what it was like not to have medical care. I said, are you to tell me I'm not to feel that? They never aired that.
You look back in the 1960s, we had Muhammad Ali not boxing for 3 years because of his religious beliefs. Finally, somebody, an athlete, standing up for what he believes in. We just don't see a lot of that these days.
And joining us now to talk about this is filmmaker Zareena Grewal. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What made you want to do this film in the first place?
Well, I was really struck by, it's an American dream story, and I'm the daughter of immigrants from Pakistan who came here and sort of realized their American dream. Of, middle-class American life. They came with nothing and sort of made a life for themselves here. And what really struck me about Chris Jackson's life story is that it's also, very much he raised himself up on it from his bootstraps, came from nothing, from poverty, and, succeeded in an incredibly competitive field, basketball. But then, of course, his story takes another turn, and it sort of turns into a nightmare of sorts when he does not stand up for the national anthem, and it becomes this huge controversy, and in fact his very kind of identity as an American is kind of called into question. And so this was sort of the window into the film that I wanted to kind of explore, this theme of the American dream and the kind of different things it can mean to people.
It really is such a fascinating story, his life. And
yeah.
How did he find Islam in the first place?
Well, he had a very successful career as a college player at Louisiana State University, and it was there really that he first came across the autobiography of Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. And many people, associate Malcolm X with the Nation of Islam as a black nationalist movement. But what really drew Chris to the story was actually the end of the story when Malcolm travels to Mecca, Saudi Arabia, for the annual Muslim pilgrimage, the Hajj, and sort of sees what to him was a kind of racial utopia, very different from the racial climate of the U.S., and he embraces what you might call the global tradition of Islam or Orthodox Islam. And this is what really drew Chris to embrace Islam, and he began to study it, and he tells a very interesting story about how he really just picked up a Quran one day, and in the turn of a page felt like he was guided, that his life had changed. And so he became Muslim really just as he was entering the NBA, and then changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf shortly thereafter.
And then, you know, he went along until it became this huge national firestorm in 1996 when he wouldn't stand at the national anthem. But it was much more than just being suspended from the NBA after that for a short period. He got death threats. He was vilified by fans. What was that incident like?
Well, first of all, he was very popular up until that point with the fans, and he had, you know, a big following and was really loved and respected by his teammates as well. And he had actually not been standing for the flag for really 2 years. It was not a big deal. It was, you know, he would sort of quietly stay in the locker room on his own and sort of walk out once the national anthem had been played. So it really wasn't any kind of theatrical thing for the media, and until it was picked up by a local Denver newspaper, and then it became a national story. And so at that point, yes, you know, when he sort of had a kind of standoff with the NBA, and you know, they urged him to stand, and he sort of stood his ground and said, "This is a belief for me, and I'm going to stand by my beliefs," and then was suspended. Then with the suspension, of course, he did start getting death threats, hate mail, hate phone calls, things like that. And ironically, people were telling him to do things like go back to Africa or things like that, not realizing that he's actually from Mississippi. So, you know, that's sort of the irony, or that it would, of course, the idea, he would, you know, get things that said go, you know, nigger go home, things like that. This really, you know, horrible sort of racist letters and phone calls and things like that. And it was, of course, very painful for him, but the irony was that people were justifying it by saying, well, maybe this is what people where he's from do, not, of course, realizing that he is an American-born, American-raised, African-American, you know, celebrity, so because of his Arabic name. So it was awful, but there was also, you know, a lot of supporters in the NBA and among his fans and in the media from across, you know, different walks of life. And so it was a charged moment, but there really were two sides to the story.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more on the life of a Muslim basketball star and the lessons we can learn from him. So stay tuned to The Mix. We're back on The Mix with filmmaker Zareena Grewal, who made a film about Denver Nuggets basketball star Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Let's take another look.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Nuggets star Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, who practiced with the team this afternoon, was suspended just 20 minutes before game time for violating his contract by refusing to stand for the national anthem. But some fellow Muslims are disappointed with the player's actions.
Islamic teachings is you worship none but God, but you respect the flag. You respect the, the honor of America.
This is a belief, and I won't compromise my beliefs.
Professor Sharif Bassione says this is not about Islam.
To claim that there's anything in the Islamic religion that would be incompatible with honoring one's national flag, national anthem, or national obligations is absolutely absurd.
People born here, Muslims, Black American and white American, saw nothing un-Islamic about his not standing and nothing un-American about his not standing. When the immigrants came over, they were empowered to define what it meant to be a Muslim in America and what the Muslim agenda should be. These people's two different histories explain their different reactions to this whole issue of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf's not standing. The bottom line question, can you be Muslim and Western? The answer is definitely, because the antithesis of Islam is to deny God. It's not the West. The antithesis of West is East.
There's some definite parallels between the way Muslims were singled out when I didn't stand for the flag and now after 9/11. Muslims are being questioned, about their patriotism, about their love for America. But when I hear that, the first question that pops into my mind is first, what is an American?
Rauf has been very vocal with the press defending Muslims after the September 11th attacks. How has all this perspective changed in a post 9/11 era?
Well, you know, I think the film actually it becomes actually more interesting in certain ways after 9/11. Actually, the film, we just finished filming the film and about a month before September 11th, and actually 2 days after we left filming, the KKK burned down Mahmoud's house in Mississippi, and so that was a sort of domestic act of terror, another building being burned down before, of course, the tragedy of 9/11. And then after 9/11, of course, the culture of patriotism in our country has sort of dramatically changed. And so I think the film is actually, it gives it a different layer or a different read when you watch the film now, to sort of see that in that moment in 1996, there still was much more space to make a criticism, and people sort of defended that in a way that maybe in a post 9/11 America that is no longer the case. People now look at sort of self-criticism or being critical of the government as being a kind of patriotic betrayal. And so that is, you know, I think something that is disturbing to me, and I hope that the film is able to kind of show us that, in fact, you know, dissent is patriotic. It can be patriotic. There's nothing un-American about it. It's actually what makes us a democracy. You know, it's easy to criticize out. I mean, if you look at like tyrannical governments in Latin America or the Middle East, they're perfectly comfortable criticizing the U.S., but they can't criticize up. And that's what's supposed to make us different, is that we are able to be self-critical. And actually, this is something that you find in the tradition of Islam as well, this tradition of dissent. And it's, I think, something that Islam and democracy have in common. So much of the discourse today is about how Islam or the Muslims are on a collision course with the West, or are fundamentally un-American, or that they can't really be fully Muslim and fully American at the same time. And so, you know, these are some of the things that I hope the film challenges. Actually, there's an image in the film of Mahmoud throwing the flag into a laundry bin, and it's very interesting. The cartoonist chooses to
hard for some people to watch.
Yeah, the cartoonist actually Arabizes his face to make him seem less American. I mean, in 2005, you know, we can't put a black Sambo image in a newspaper without a riot, but you still are allowed to kind of, you know, make these sort of racist images of Arabs and Middle Easterners. And of course, in a post 9/11 America, it's the immigrant Muslims that are really most vulnerable to hate crimes and discrimination, and so it really shifts the story in that direction.
That brings up another really interesting point of the film, is that he's not Arab, and there are incredibly divergent feelings between Muslim immigrants and African American Muslims, and there are a lot of things that divide and separate them.
Right. Well, Islam is now the second largest religion in the U.S., and Muslim Americans are an incredibly diverse body of people. Most of them tend to be African American, Arab, or immigrants from South Asia, and they often pray most places of worship in the U.S. are very segregated racially, but mosques are still pretty integrated. However, people praying next to each other don't often understand each other. That's the problem. So often what you have is that the immigrants don't understand the African American experience or African American history in the U.S. or their relationship to a symbol like the flag. And then on the African American side, they often don't appreciate that these immigrants are coming from parts of the world where there is no history of dissent, there is no freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or freedom of religion even sometimes in the Muslim world. So it's a kind of miscommunication, and this is what the film is trying to show, is that these two Muslim communities are really coming from different histories, and that is reflected in how they respond to what happened to Mahmoud.
It's a really crucial message and an interesting story. Thank you for sharing it with us,
Zareena Grewal. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
The film is called By the Dawn's Early Light, Chris Jackson's Journey to Islam. Thanks for watching this edition of The Mix. I'm Gigi Stone. Stay tuned. It's really interesting.